So I wanted to explain to you kids what the early life was like for Superhero Granddad. See, before he was a spy kid, he grew up he grew up in a little town called Hillendale, and his best teacher was Grammy. And he had 5 brothers and 3 sisters, and they all lived in a simple house. And Grammy taught all of the kids to be independent. It was so important to eat healthy foods and do their homework and learn how to enjoy the simple things in life. So when it was playing time, she encouraged the kids to go outside and get some sunshine and play. And the kids would say, but we don't have any fancy games and toys to play with. And she said, no, you don't understand. All you need to do is just play with some sticks. And so the kids learned how to make forts and cars and rocket ships, and they learned how to put them on the ground and make secret messages that only they could read. And when the children turned 12, Grammy gave them seeds and explained that at age 13, they would have to grow their own food, so they better plant their seeds now. And she gave them books on how to be farmers. And when they turned 13, she gave each of them a cow and some chickens. And after this, they were on their own for their food. So this is how Granddad grew up, and how he learned to be a spy kid, and how he learned how to fix things. Bicycles and broken windows and swings. And he helped everyone in the neighborhood fix things. Well, there were a few bad families in that neighborhood. The Sanders, the Bozos, and the Musks. Some people are just evil. And they yelled at all the kids in their neighborhood and drove down the street really fast, which was very dangerous. And they smoked cigarettes, and they tried to get the little kids to smoke cigarettes. And they caused mischief for the families who had school children. In the evening, they would call up a family and pretend to be one of the children's teachers, and they would say, "Good evening, Mrs. Allison. This is Mr. Speck, your son's teacher. He's causing too much trouble in school, and we may have to expel him." And Mrs. Allison would say, "Well, what was he doing? What's wrong?" And Mr. Sanders would say, "Every time we ask him a question in class, like what is 3 plus 4, or what is the capital of Texas, or any question at all, his answer would always be underpants." And by the time the phone call was finished, Mrs. Allison was crying, and she was getting ready to punish her son. And Mrs. Musk, she was another evil one. She would call another family, the Slagles, in and introduce herself as their daughter's teacher, and she would tell Mrs. Slagle that her daughter was causing big problems at recess because all she would do was turn around and spin around in circles, around and round and round, until she was dizzy and she would fall down. And then she'd go back to the classroom after recess and do the same thing. Well, Mrs. Slagle was very worried about her daughter because this is weird, and she took her to the doctor. And Mr. Bozo was the worst. He would call a family and tell them that their son might be insane because he kept going to the principal's office and say, "I shouldn't be a student here. I am the King of England, and my wife is the Queen of England, and she is frozen." Well, the family, the Bidens, they were horrified because they were socialists, and they didn't want a king in their family. Well, young Granddad called all of the families, and they made a plan for the next time one of the evil families called. So when they called Mr. Johnson and told him that his son would do his assignments in the classroom, and then he would eat the paper or the assignment, he'd eat it all, Mr. Johnson quickly said, "Yes, sir, that's my boy, and we're so proud of him." Then Mr. Johnson would try to sell the evil caller some Girl Scout cookies. And the other families did the same thing when they got a call. They would say, "Yes, sir, that's my precious daughter or my precious son, and that's exactly what we taught them to do." So the evil families didn't know what to do, and they stopped doing this kind of mischief. Then Superhero Granddad would go to the public phone. They don't exist anymore, and he would call everyone in the neighborhood and say things like, "Hi, this is Mr. Musk, and we're moving, and we're giving away all of our possessions. So please come to our house and take everything." So hundreds of people went over to the Musk's house, and they took everything away. His outside furniture, they went into the house, they took away his couch, his refrigerator, and almost everything. And they were so excited to get free stuff. Mr. Musk, he didn't know what to do. There were so many of them, and he just went crazy, and he couldn't stop them. Then a few days later, when the evil Sanders was on vacation, their family went away, young Granddad called all the neighbors and pretended that he was Mr. Sanders and wanted all of his neighbors to help him paint his house. So please come by with some green paint. Come over any time and start painting. Well, when they returned from their vacation to Sanders, they were shocked because their house had been painted green and they didn't know what to do. Then young Granddad called the Girl Scouts of America and said, "Hi, this is Mr. Bozo. I am very rich and I want to buy $1 million worth of Thin Mints." Well, pretty soon the whole street was filled up with Girl Scouts trying to sell $1 million worth of Thin Mints to the Bozos. And young Granddad was relentless. He kept up these kinds of tricks for weeks, and finally the Musks, the Sanders, and the Bozos couldn't stand it anymore, and they moved away. So you could tell from a very early age that this young man was going to grow up to be a superhero.